Excited to work with him, a young brother there in Nashville. I love shouting him out, and hope this finds you in great spirits. I'm here in Memphis. It's a rainy day here in Memphis as we're kind of on the intro pieces of spring. And of course, here in Memphis, where we tend to blend a lot of seasons in one day, it might go from 40 in the morning to 80 in the afternoon and then back to 40 in the evening sometimes. So we're always going back and forth with our weather here. But again, so glad that you could join us. Make sure you check me out. champ10k.com is where you could go. You can connect with me. I've got a ton of different resources, free and discounted for you, as you all know. So make sure you check that out at champ10k.com. For those of you that are watching the NCAA tournament, of course, my bracket was toe up pretty early, thanks to Kentucky and some of the other teams that bowed out early. A little bit of money was sacrificed in that effort. So thank you very much. For those of you that do bet on sports. I don't do much of that, but I did a little bit for the tournament. And I sacrificed a few coins with that, so it just means I gotta go work a little harder, right? But yeah, so we're here today, episode number 288, and I'm extremely excited about our guest that's joining us today, and she's joining on short notice. Shout out to you! You all know Liv. If you remember from episode 100, her and I got a chance to cut up for the 100th episode. So y'all, some of y'all still reach out to me about Liv. So she's there. She's extremely active. Liv became a hit after episode number 100. I had people sending me messages. I had your men reaching out to me. Like, hold on, brother. Relax, okay? Calm down. Calm down, brother. But again, I'm excited to have our guest today, Dr. Bridget Williams, joining us. She's the owner of Green Harvest Health, which is a medical cannabis clinic located in kind of that central Ohio area. Green Harvest Health is the only medical cannabis clinic in Ohio with life and wellness coaching incorporated into the practice. So super dope. And we want to talk about that. She's an author, and we're going to get into the book. I don't want to spoil that because I want her to share some things about the book, Courage in Cannabis. And NYB, you know how I am. I'm going to encourage you to make sure you go out and purchase the book. And then don't just purchase it, then read it. Okay. Purchase the book and read it. Okay. And then if you're so compelled to, you'll be able to reach out to our guest and share your thoughts as well. But Dr. Bridget, thank you so much for taking time to cut up with us a little bit here on the MYB podcast.
Absolutely. I am honored to sit and talk with you today. So I appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. And so let's get into it and get started. For those that aren't familiar with you, tell us a little bit about yourself and kind of how you got started.
Absolutely. So I am a family physician. I spent almost 20 years at the Cleveland Clinic. Got a little frustrated a little bit too early, and I knew I wanted to treat patients differently. So I had patients that were really concerned about the amount of time we were spending. That 15-minute visit doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah.
And so, and it wasn't working for me either. I wanted to understand my patients a little bit better. So along that road, I started helping patients with getting off of medications. And during that period of time, and this is about 15 years ago, I started working with a patient that asked me about medical cannabis. And during that period of time, I thought she was a little nuts. But I had a great deal of respect for her. She had just completed treatment for breast cancer, as well as just diagnosed a new diabetic. And I started working with her using edibles and smoking, and she was normalizing her blood sugars. She was losing weight. She was sleeping better, less stress. So that's really how this started for me. So fast forward 15 years later, and I knew I wanted to be in the space, but really wanted to focus on empowerment of the patient and education. So I opened Green Harvest Health. I also became a life coach during that period of time because I realized that was part of the issue. that we weren't spending enough time, and I needed to get to know my patients better. So from there, I opened my own practices, started teaching, and eventually creating the book as well, to really help normalize cannabis use as a medicine, for all sorts of conditions and all sorts of people.
So, Dr. Bridget, did you always kind of know that you were going to get into the medical field, even as a youth, or was this something that kind of more developed as you got into adulthood, or kind of tell us a little bit about that? I'm always curious as to when people get into the medical field, such a selfless field. My wife's in the field as well, and I'm always curious at what point did you kind of know that you wanted to be in that field and help people from the health and wellness standpoint.
Absolutely. So, I honestly thought I was gonna go into psychology, and, I was a kid reading psych books, and, unfortunately, probably doing a little analyzation on some of my friends along the way, and, when my father became ill with, colon cancer, when I was about 10 years old or so. And so we were in and out of the hospitals, and a team of doctors would walk in, and they wouldn't even acknowledge that there were these two little kids there and a wife, and they would talk. They wouldn't even really acknowledge my father for that matter, right? They would kind of talk at him or about him, but not
Mm,
to him, right?
yeah.
And I time and time again, they'd walk out and I look at my mom and I'm like, "I think you just kill me today," you know? And she was like, "You should." And over again, that happened. And I wanted to utilize my love for people and the brain and psychology and apply that to medicine. So that's how I ended up in this space.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you talked about cannabis, and I definitely want to go there because for the longest time in this country, cannabis was vilified, right? And you fast forward as you get into really more the 2010s when you started to see a little bit of a lesson. You started having states, of course, approve the legalization of cannabis and that sort of thing. Can you kind of walk me through your thoughts on, how cannabis was vilified in decades past, and how now it's been more embraced and people have come to gain a much better understanding and education, Dr. Bridget, around its use and the benefits that come from its usage?
Mhm. So, money rules the world, right? And
Of
a lot
course.
about why cannabis became vilified. It was money, it was racism, it was control.
Yeah.
And when alcohol prohibition was failing, to kind of keep the status quo, and there was this influx of new Americans, Mexicans from Mexico were coming in, and there was this issue with immigration, which sounds familiar, right?
Yeah.
And in the process, they were bringing medicine with them, and well as it coming from other parts of the world, and to control the failure with alcohol prohibition, to control this, immigration of new people coming into the U.S., and to support the new industry, pharmaceutical industry of synthetic meds, we vilified cannabis. And so that's kind of like the short answer, right?
Yeah.
And so up until that point, pharmacists were making compound medicines with cannabis on a regular basis. It was a part of our normal medicinal approach to conditions.
Wow.
But when pharmaceutical companies were able to make synthetics and they needed the support for it to outshine cannabis use, which people could grow in their backyard, they had to make it evil. And they did. And there's no better way to control people than through fear. And they could have just pushed the synthetics alone. But if they really wanted that to go further, let's make us afraid of what we already know, right?
Wow.
Afraid of each other, afraid of the medicine that we already use. And that's, how we got reefer madness and, everything that developed. And it's hard to undo fear.
Mm.
And so if you look at how it was a short period of time, back in the late 30s, early 40s, that whole propaganda began, but it still lives to this day. And
Yes.
so, but as we develop more pharmaceuticals, as the medical health systems have become more less about the art of medicine and more about the money of medicine, people have become
Mm.
frustrated with the current systems
Yes.
and tired of pharmaceuticals. And though I'm not anti-pharmaceuticals, they can do amazing things, and the science behind them is phenomenal, but they can also cause some damage as well. And people are more and more are swaying back to more holistic practices. And I think, that's how a lot of this began, was with the AIDS epidemic and the nausea and the discomfort that, people that had developed AIDS were having in California. And that was a huge boost towards using cannabis as a medicine. And then little by little, it spread across the US. So it is coming a little bit more full circle. It is going back to the original uses of the plant itself,
Mm.
because originally this was a medicinal plant. And I'm hoping that as we don't forget our past, I hope, because we can get much further if we take that knowledge and, push forward.
Yeah, that's so rich, Doctor. Wow. I mean, you gave us some history understanding, some things that I just wasn't aware of in terms of the history of cannabis. And you're exactly right. That fear factor, right,
Mhm.
and how that's been used really as propaganda throughout American history, and then certainly as it relates to cannabis
Mhm.
and people's attitudes towards it, even to this very day. That's very interesting, and I think something for all of us to take away and recognize. And so, how would you describe, just at a basic level, the benefits of cannabis, right? Because I always want to make sure, like in this discussion, that people really do understand, because there's so much. Again, we talked about propaganda. There's so much misinformation, right?
Mhm.
From your thought and how you practice, what are some of those top line, benefits to cannabis use?
Absolutely. So it really starts with the endocannabinoid system, right? So we have a system built in our bodies that oversees every single system in our bodies. Okay. We have receptors for the endocannabinoid system in every organ of our body, including our skin. And so the benefits of phytocannabinoids, which we're getting from cannabis, is that it helps regulate our endocannabinoid system.
Mm.
THC, which is the more euphoric cannabinoid, but also has medicinal value, is very similar to what we already produce in our bodies, right? CBD helps really regulate the system by improving the receptors, keeping our natural endocannabinoids functioning well. And so the real benefit behind cannabis is that it starts at the endocannabinoid system, and that
Mm.
it helps either up or down regulate certain signals to
Yeah.
help our bodies be in balance. That's really all it does. It puts our bodies back into balance.
Wow.
And so I could go through every little organ and every condition that it helps, but that's really the true answer is balance through our endocannabinoid system.
Yeah, absolutely. No, thank you for that, Doctor. And so, just, if you think about this in its simplest terms, right?
Mhm.
Myself, for example, since the statute of limitations have passed, uh, for those of us that came up smoking cannabis or smoking weed and things like that, how do you compare that use to more of the medical use? And do the same benefits exist? I've heard that question asked before,
Mhm.
but I've never really heard, I guess, maybe the correct answer. Is there any parallels or differences between kind of the more recreational use to the medical use?
So back in the day, what you get is what you got, right?
Right,
Like
right,
you
right,
didn't say, "Oh, how many terpenes?" Like you didn't try to figure out what your cannabinoid levels were. What you got is what you got, and so
right.
I always think all use is medicinal, but as we've grown as a cannabis industry, we're able to produce strains and products that can be specified towards certain ailments, right? And
Right.
so to be able to, let's say, go into a dispensary and saying I have trouble sleeping, and then to be given something very specific for that, that's how it becomes medicinal. To have an understanding of terpenes, which are the essential oils of the cannabis plant, and choose flower that are high in certain terpenes rather than others, because that's going to help you better with your anxiety or your pain or inflammation. That's where it becomes medicinal. So we've gone from just getting what you get to really specifying and looking for the intricate parts of the cannabis plant and being able to extract that to be that much more helpful for you.
Yeah. Excellent. Excellent. One of the best answers I've heard to that question. I've heard that question asked in different ways in the past. And I appreciate you sharing and clarifying that for us. CBD. You mentioned that earlier, and there's been the rise in CBDs. All of us have seen the rise in CBD, the number of CBD stores. I tell you, I was in DC a couple years ago, and one street I went on, there must have been 10 CBD stores up and down the street. I mean, it's grown huge. For those that look to get into that particular side of the industry, what do they need to know as a CBD store owner, and how they can educate their customers? So as opposed to just simply being a retailer, how can they level up their knowledge so that they can really educate their customers on those benefits that you mentioned, and how to kind of somewhat custom tailor them to their customers' kind of identified need? Do you see any kind of way that education level can build up for CBD business owners?
Absolutely. So I think education is key. The one thing that I have found disappointing is when I go into CBD stores and a little bit of a secret shopper, right?
Right.
Um, and ask questions, and it is set up as more of a retail than a medicinal option, right?
Yeah.
So I highly, highly encourage her in the CBD space, be educated because your customer is expecting a lot, right?
Yes.
So, like I do videos which are easily accessible, called the Cannabis Hub, that can be very helpful for owners to obtain at a decent cost. You can go further and get more of a certification level, a little bit more in depth through other platforms. Cleveland School of Cannabis, Harrington Institute, they all provide online options so that you can get your education, be able to really help people in a more beneficial way, and then work with other educators in the field. Have information nights. So even if you don't have the time to educate yourself, bring in people that can educate your clients and your patients so that they're making the best option. But ultimately, know your COAs, which is your certificate of analysis for the products that you're carrying. There's a lot of crap out there. There's a lot of
Yeah.
what it says on the label, what's in the bottle is not the same. We're not FDA regulated. So the only way that you have to know that you're carrying a good product is you have to be able to read those COAs. You need to be able to read the lab results so that you can tell your patients what's going on so that you can lead them in the right direction. But I find quite often that people don't know a lot about cannabis or know a lot about CBD, and it's all about the taste and the flavor, and it feels good, and there's so much more to it than that.
Yeah. Yep,
Mhm.
absolutely. Dr. Bridget Williams is our guest today on episode 288 of the Minding Your Business podcast. To transition a little bit, Dr. Bridget, we were talking a little bit offline about banking and the cannabis industry, which is kind of near and dear to both of our hearts. For me, coming from the banking world and remembering kind of the advent of it, and I traveled to different and spoke at different banking conferences where it was often a subject amongst the bankers. So there was kind of this thought that the actual bankers wanted to be able to bank the industry, right? They see a growing industry. It's very cash intensive. There's usually not a ton of lending that really they thought came from it, but they definitely wanted to bank the deposits, right? It was kind of almost like an underground type of thing in their state, and they wanted to participate. However, their regulators, right, are much different. The banking regulators, and so that's what was very interesting, I guess, about that relationship. From your standpoint, being in the industry, what do you see the relationship between the cannabis industry and banking, and what are some ways in your mind that that could improve such that the cannabis industry can participate and gain the same benefits that other industries and business get from having access to the financial system?
Absolutely. So we're considered a high risk industry, whether it's cannabis or CBD, simply because of what we sell or the name that we use, right?
Yeah.
So even with our book, Courage in Cannabis, I've had some of the authors in the book lose their PayPal accounts simply because of the name of the book. The book doesn't tell you how to consume cannabis. It's simply people's stories and how it changed their life, but they've lost their PayPal accounts forever. There's no
Yeah.
going back, right?
Right.
I've had customers that want to get into the industry and need a loan to be able to make that happen. And it's not an option. So here we have an industry that really cuts itself off from new entrepreneurs. It is really only benefits big corporation with already has great funding or people that can obtain investors on a high level, and that's not right. You know, if you we're talking about banking, and we talked with groups about the Safe Banking Act, so we can get beyond this. But to be quite honest, we're also talking about social equity here, right?
Right. Exactly.
And can we have an industry, and we're talking about the war on drugs. We're talking about people and groups of people, and particularly Black and Brown people that have suffered because of the war on drugs, and how now there is an industry that can bring them back from that,
That's
but
a
they're
fact.
not really allowed to get into the industry because they cannot. It's not seen as a viable option for them. That's wrong.
Yeah.
And people, you know, everyone's excited about the green rush, but the green rush isn't there for everyone. And that needs to change because it definitely affected us more. So we should even benefit that much greater.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about the social equity piece of it, and you talked about the war on drugs, doctor, and all and the impact of that from the late '70s through the '80s and then early '90s. And so you've got a large population of Black and brown folks that are behind walls over cannabis, right? And so even as states have legalized cannabis, there are still within those very same states men and women who are behind bars over what were former charges against them for their possession or usage of cannabis. Where are we with that as in your thoughts as a country, and how do we fight for that? Because there's kind of those two lanes, right? There's the ability to get into the industry, which we were talking about, and the limitations on banking and the some of the federal regulations kind of being set up to grossly limit that on purpose. And then you've got the large population of people who have been impacted with their freedom, quite frankly, from those poor policies and those regulations. So, how can we, kind of work together to bring one awareness to that, Dr. Bridget, and help, change some of those policies around cannabis, and ultimately get to the releasing of those folks who have been imprisoned wrongly for cannabis engagement.
Absolutely. So number one, it's legalization, right? So as long as we're still talking about something that is scheduled as an illegal drug, basically,
Right.
until we have not just state to state, but legal across the country, it's always going to be difficult, right?
Yeah.
And so that's in itself stops us in our tracks as far as what we're able to do a as a people, as progressing and being able to benefit from this. And then when we are talking about social equity, um, a lot of people use the terminology, and some of the states try to say that they have opportunities, but for instance, Ohio has none, period, right? And then there's
Right.
some states that your idea of social equity is that the state owns part of your business. They decide what happens and what doesn't happen, and now you're in business with the state. There's other ones that the benefits are so minimal that it doesn't really provide anything, and they're using the words and the names and saying we have a social equity program, but what they offer is not really anything that people can actually benefit from. So I think in some ways we need to come together as Black and Brown people to decide what we can do for ourselves in this area. But until we have true legalization, it's going to continue to be difficult. And we need to demand from our legislators better programs to even the field. There are expungement clinics that develop, but if you've ever come in contact with a plant before legalization, and it can ruin your ability to have any, significant career. Don't let this be another one, right?
Yes.
So, we need to continue these conversations and stop pretending that when someone uses the word social equity, that it actually does anything for anybody, because it's not necessarily true.
Yep, I couldn't agree more. Couldn't even said that any better. Dr. Bridget Williams joining us here again, episode 288 of the Minding Your Business podcast. Make sure you go to drbridgetwilliams.com where you can connect with Dr. Bridget and her team and just learn a little bit more about today's subject as we talk about the cannabis industry. We did get a question. My guy Alvin, sent us a question about explaining what CBDs are, and so if we could go through that just kind of briefly, Dr. Bridget, as to what CBD is, just so we can provide that for Alvin and anyone else who had that question.
Absolutely. So, CBD is short for cannabidiol. And cannabidiol is one of the active molecules or compounds that you find in cannabis. But keep in mind, it's also in other plants as well, right? So, cannabinoids, which is like the grouping of these active compounds, are found in carrots and broccoli and other vegetables and other foods in itself, right? Other plants.
Yeah.
It's just in cannabis, it is that much more abundant. So that's where we choose to harvest it from. So I'm working with a guy right now that is extracting cannabinoids from orange peels, right? So you find this in not just cannabis. Phytocannabinoids are found in many plants. Okay. So cannabidiol itself, CBD, is what I really consider the workhorse of cannabis. It is what regulates our endocannabinoid system that we didn't even know about until the 1990s. It helps repair the receptors. It helps our endocannabinoids, what we're actually innately born with. That helps regulate every other system. It helps regulate that as well. And so CBD is a compound that it's not psychoactive, meaning it doesn't give a euphoric effect, okay? Though
Right.
active in the brain, but it doesn't cause euphoria or get you high or however you want to say it, right?
Right. Right.
I want to make sure we're all talking the same language, right?
Right. Right. Right.
But it does the majority of the work that you find cannabis to do, right? It's more abundant in hemp than it is in cannabis plants per se, or marijuana plants, I should say. But it is really the workforce. It does the majority of the work to really keep our bodies in balance.
Yep, excellent. No, thank you so much, and thank you, Alvin Thomas, for that question. And everyone, keep them coming. If you've got questions and you happen to be on the live, shoot them over. And if we've got time and it makes sense, then I'll ask Dr. Bridget, our guest here today. Doctor, let's get into the book real quick.
Sure.
Courage in Cannabis. I love that one, that title, and I think it kind of embodies what we've talked about thus far. Courage in Cannabis, an anthology of inspiring stories written by heroes that you've curated, and I want to encourage everybody. The link is in the bio for those that are listening to the podcast. Make sure that you pick up a copy of the book. You can go into the link and purchase it. You can go to courageincannabis.com as well to do so. But Dr., talk about the inspiration behind the book and these great dynamic people that I'm seeing that you've brought together to add, just tremendous value in this. I look forward to the read. I've placed my order as well, so the MYB community knows before I ask them. I've already placed my order, so I don't ask them to do nothing I haven't done. That's not what we do here. We like to support that way. So again, I'm gonna tell y'all, order the book and then read it. Yes, don't just order it and then it's not an expensive, coaster. It is for you to get it and to read it. But you've got some great, really dynamic folks that are part of this. So again, what's the inspiration behind it, and what can we expect, from reading the book?
Absolutely. So the inspiration really comes from when I got into the place where I started seeing medical cannabis patients, and I would hand over their card. And I had grown men get emotional, right? And I was like, so what is behind all this? And keep in mind, up until that first year, up until the moment that I handed them that card, if they had used cannabis, they had been using it illegally. So when I'm giving this card, it was freedom from shame and guilt. I had, dads say, I don't need to hide anymore or be embarrassed that my son knows that I use this because now it's dad's medicine. I had women that were afraid to get involved with their church because they thought that they couldn't be around other church members and they were going to possibly even be kicked out of their church, right?
Wow.
And
wow.
So I was gathering these stories together, and I actually had the opportunity to publish them before. But my heart told me this isn't my story, right? So I sat on it, and a couple years down the road, I came across the concept of anthologies. And so I wanted people to not only write their own story, but I wanted them to benefit from it as well. So when you go to Courage in Cannabis, you can buy our book on Amazon, which is a #1 bestseller, international bestseller, best release in our category. But you can also buy it directly from some of the authors on there as well, which is, I want people to, if they've gone through these experiences, they should also benefit. Much as like we were talking about with social equity, right? Don't make it and then not have the true benefits there. So we want them to benefit from writing their stories as well. But we have doctors and lawyers and patients and caregivers, people that were giving cannabis to their kids and had to confront their faith, people dealing with addiction. We have educators, entrepreneurs that left good jobs to take a leap into the cannabis industry, and journalists and activists as well. And so it's all filled with education about the industry and on so many different levels, and about cannabis on so many different levels. But it's also a book of inspiration about how people have took a leap into something that really required courage to get there. And people have enjoyed the book on a lot of different levels, and so it's been, it's my passion project.
Yeah, excellent. No, I love that. I love that, again, that, bringing in that collection of people to share and really pour in, and, debunking a lot of the myths and things like that around, the industry and really the importance of it, going forward as we advance the healthcare industry. I recently, my doctor here, black man doctor here in Memphis, who's been my longtime kind of general doctor. He is very, not only one supportive of cannabis, and has recommended it to his patients. And I've seen that evolution kind of over time of being, and that's why I love the title of the book, the courage to be able to do that. Whereas I think in the past for himself and others, they may admit, because of the stigmas and things like that you talked about, they weren't as open to recommending that. And there was this tie to the kind of the synthetic drug. And I think as this generation of people continues to advance and evolve, I think embracing, cannabis and the benefits of cannabis and embracing the entire industry is going to continue to grow and evolve. And the things that you mentioned in terms of, the policy pieces, the legalization, things like that, there's going to be more of a pressure on policymakers, to do the right thing, so to speak, and let's continue to evolve this thing. And so I've ordered the book. Matter of fact, I was looking as you were saying that. I've got it available for audiobook as well, on the Kindle, I guess.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are on the Kindle, check it out. So I was able to pick it up there as well. So yeah, you get it pretty much instant. It's already downloaded. So go ahead and do that as well. So, Doctor, as we kind of bring this to a close, because you've given us some very rich things to think about. And I hope everybody has enjoyed this conversation and been educated just like I have. Where do you see things, as we're coming through the pandemic? One, what was kind of the impact of the pandemic on your business? I'm curious as to, what that was and kind of what you saw and, that sort of thing. And then where do you see kind of your business and the industry kind of in the more short term in these next, rounding out 2022 and into 2023 and beyond? Where do you kind of anticipate, seeing the direction of your business?
Absolutely. So the pandemic, so
Yeah.
so obviously it was difficult for everyone. I would say that in some ways, it increased the amount of people that we were seeing, at least for a period of time, because people weren't working. People
Yes.
were dealing with more anxiety, more depression, and so we had actually more people coming in for, during some of that period of that time. They also just had more time.
Yeah.
People that had wanted to come in, had medical conditions, but just never take off work or what have you, they were able to take the time and come in and do that. They then, we then had some people that were kind of utilizing this time to really focus on their own health.
Yeah.
And try to use the time to the best of their ability. So we were considered essential. We continued to work during that period of time. And when the state of Ohio allowed us to do telemedicine. And so then that allowed people to stay at home and then also get the medical care that we provide as well. Because the one thing I would say, we're very different from card companies, which are, you get cards for cash and you're in, you're out. We provide treatment plans. We do the life coaching. We provide a medical option with education to empower patients and really treating them with empathy. A lot of this is very anxiety provoking to come in and get cards for their conditions because of all the propaganda that we talked about before. So
Right.
we really do offer something different. As far as where we see this going forward, we provide our own line of CBD products and help people get into the industry by being able to sell and create products as well. And I think even as we do legalize, education is going to only become more and more important. There's going to be more research. There's going to be more options that people need to filter through. So I suspect that I see our business growing with more and more education over time and helping people choose the right type of products that are right for their health as we grow.
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely. And, of course, as everything's kind of gone up with pricing and people are complaining about gas prices and things like that, the impact on kind of disposable income, at least in the short term, is there. But I agree with you that as people now, that one of the things that the pandemic brought to light is people kind of more internalizing where they want to be as opposed to what are they, right? And when I say that is people were defining themselves oftentimes by their work, by their job, and things like that. And the pandemic kind of showed them that, or at least revealed in their face that one, life is very precious, right? And what are you doing with your time that you have during this life, and making it as enjoyable as possible? And then people engaging in things that they really want to do. And
Right.
oftentimes in their job, that's not really what they wanted to do. It's kind of more of a means to an end.
Absolutely.
And so I think that what you said is so dynamic in that as people start to engage in themselves, one of the things they begin to look at is even into their health.
Absolutely.
And then looking at those more natural ways to engage in their health.
Right. And we help
It's
people get off
yeah.
of medications as well, right?
Oh,
So
wow.
even when you're
Okay.
talking about the cost of this, and depending
Yes.
on where you live, the cost can be fair to extraordinary, right?
Yeah.
But what people want to do more than anything with the patient population that we work with is they want to get off of some of their other medications. And that helps decrease the cost, right? You're not paying for two things now, you're paying for one. And so that's a great deal of what I enjoy doing with patients is helping them figure that out, working with their doctor to share what we're doing on our end, to make sure they get the support, from the other end as well, so that, people want to take less pills.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. So this has been a just tremendous conversation, in this period of time, just learning from you and listening to you talk about the industry with the passion that you do and the expertise that you do. Make sure that you support by picking up the book, Courage in Cannabis. The link is in the bio. There you go. She's got it right here for those that are watching. It's right there. I'm going to have my copy here in about a few days, hopefully. Hint, hint, Amazon. And so I'm looking forward to that. And again, this is a great way that we can become more educated as a community and support one another at the same time. Dr. Bridget, I always like to ask my guests, just as a business owner, that obviously can be a challenge to say the least. What is the kind of impact of family for you? As you run your business and whatever form that family takes for you, how important is that for you as you grow your business, particularly in an industry, again, that's got so many misconceptions and people kind of come with preconceived notions that we're breaking down today through this conversation. But talk about that and the impact of family and that family support as you grow your business.
Absolutely. So, for my, larger family, they all but fell out of their chairs when they learned what I was doing, which I enjoyed all of that. I enjoyed every moment of that.
Right.
But they've been incredibly supportive, and that, if anything, now we're coming together on a common subject and something that we can kind of discuss, and I can help and support them in a different way. I will say that for my daughters, who are 15 and 17, it was
Yeah.
important that they understood what I was doing.
Yes.
And that they not only saw that I was taking medicine in a different direction, but that my work ethic was something that they understood. And so I have to say I have incredibly driven daughters, because they see how hard mom works, right? On top of that, with them understanding that I was moving a little bit more into the cannabis space, and I still do family medicine, they they were incredibly supportive of this because they saw me doing something innovative and really stepping outside of the box. And I think that is something that they admired as well. To the point where I told definitely my oldest daughter, you don't have to tell everybody what I do,
Right.
because she was proud.
Right.
She was proud of the work that I do and how hard I work to make it happen. And so, but you don't need to, tell the whole school. So,
Right.
uh,
Right.
but that
Exactly.
balance is very important to me. That they,
Yeah.
because you don't want to work to the point where they feel neglected,
Yes.
and you want them to gain lessons and knowledge from the work that you do. And so I feel like that's something.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny because I have three daughters. Now they're a little bit younger than yours. I've got 12, 11, and 10.
Yeah.
And in the same way, I like for them to, if there's anything to pick up, it's like say the work ethic and how you build relationships and how you get up from being knocked down and how you stay, what I like to call tenaciously focused. As you're going forward, those are some of the, like you mentioned, kind of the lessons and kind of skill set building that you like for your children to pick up. From hearing you, from being around you, and seeing how you operate. So definitely appreciate that. Now, Doctor, I do have to ask you. I can't let you get away without asking you this either. So are you kind of the life of the party then, as being the cannabis lady? Hey, Bridget brings the weed. She brings the CBD. Are you? Or do we need to cut the tape? Cut the tape. Cut the tape.
I got cut from an interview probably a year ago because of how I answered that. So
really, well, you're not interviewing for anything now. You completely own your business, and you're not interviewing for anything other than cutting up with a nut like me.
I definitely. It's always a great topic of conversation. So
yeah,
I'll leave it at that. Always a great topic of conversation.
There you go. No, I love that. Dr. Bridget Williams joins us today. Doctor, again, I can't say it enough. This has been tremendous. I'm so glad that Liv connected us, our mutual friend. Definitely what you're doing is really making a difference. I can see that, breaking down these barriers and helping us, all of us from our generation, as we continue to advance. I look forward to seeing how your work helps us, with that, and something that's very important to us, and that's our overall wellness. Absolutely. Right? Particularly as our people are living a little bit longer, and people are getting to a point where their wellness is extremely important, particularly on that back part of their life. As they get past their working years, and people have an extended life kind of beyond the time they stop working till kind of that very end. And it's just important that we keep that in mind, what the mental piece of it does, along with, the mind, body, and soul. And so thank you so much to you and your team for what you're doing with that. I know sometimes it can be a selfless, job and kind of uphill battle, particularly when we talk about the banking side of it. But, I'm confident that, all of us working together can help debunk that some. And I actually have a contact for you. I don't know if you deal with anybody at the Ohio Bankers League. But I know they advocate for the banking industry there in Ohio. So you may want to connect with them. And I've got a contact there that someone that you'll really enjoy, her personality. So she'd definitely be in your favor, for that. But again, thank you so much. Everyone, please be sure to pick up a copy of Courage in Cannabis. By Dr. Bridget Williams. Make sure you go to drbridgetwilliams.com. Again, and all there in the show notes.
Go to
please.
Green Harvest.
Yes.
.health.
Greenharvest.health.
That'll
there
have
we
all
go.
the information.
Yep, excellent. So make sure you do that. Greenharvest.health. Make sure you go there. So everyone's got homework to go do that, and make sure you get a copy of the book. But again, Dr. Bridget, I really appreciate you. Bless you.
I'm enjoying it.
Yeah, excellent. So listen, we're going to get out of here. This has been episode 288. Shout out to everybody that's watching this, whether it's being streamed or you come back and listen to the podcast. I really appreciate you all support. We're getting closer to that episode 300. So I'm going to have something very special that we're getting in mind there. Y'all been asking me about Liv coming back. You never know. She might make an appearance. But I'm extremely excited about that and what you all do to support me in the messages that you send and the DMs and the inboxes and all of that is always helpful, and I appreciate that definitely so much. 3 things that unite us all, no matter where you're from, no matter what side of the tracks you're from, what side of the ocean, we all have 3 things in common. We all want to be a little bit better for ourselves, a little bit better for our families, and a little bit better for our communities. And if we keep that in mind with everyone that we interact with, we can all collectively make this place just a little bit better. So I always say that in these shows, as you all know, And I'm going to keep on saying it. We can all make this place just a little bit better if we keep those things in mind with everyone that we interact with. Champ Ron, the Minding Your Business podcast. I look forward to seeing you here for the next episode 289. Until then, be great.